Our first speaker for today will be Regis Bocaro, who is the CIO from Bad Dog Consulting. He will be talking to us about Changefeed, Cosmos DB Changefeed. The topic is Tales from the Trenches. So, Regis, over to you. Looking forward to hear about all the wonderful things you have done using Changefeed.
Thank you. Thank you. So am I live now? So sharing the screen and all? Yeah, I guess so. So good morning, everyone. Yeah, as you said, my name is Regis Bacao. I'm a French guy doing Azure architecture and infrastructure consulting. Previously Microsoft employee, also as an architect, and previously data platform MVP. Today I'm going to explain a very shortly a project that we did using CosmosDB Changefeed for a financial company, and especially about the challenges we encountered and how we tried to solve those challenges. So briefly, the agenda is what was the problem we tried to solve with Changefeed, what were the solutions, because there is more than one, how did we end up scaling up and scaling out on those solutions. Our goal was to deserialize some Cosmos DB documents to put that into a database. So how we manage that, a bit about the governance of this Changefeed and the whole setup, what we plan on doing on the next steps, and maybe some time for questions. I'm aware that we have 25 minutes, so I will try to do everything quickly and shortly, so there is eventually time for questions. So basically, the problem we try to solve was that we have in this financial company, which is an insurance company, they have bought a third-party financial product, and every time someone makes a payment into their insurance policy, or some money is moving, there is a change into a Cosmos DB document happening, and they wanted to build a enterprise data warehouse on top of these changes, on top of these documents. So it's not just a single collection, it's not just a single database, but the relevance, the relevant collections for this setup was around 80 collections spread over 4 databases, Cosmos DB databases. And the destination is a Azure SQL managed instance. So I'm aware this is a Cosmos DB conference, but managed instance also has proven to have a few irritating limitations. We are working with deserialization and what was coming from Changefeed. But anyhow, just very shortly about Changefeed. Someone has called it the hidden gem of Cosmos DB. It is hidden, but it is composed of 4 parts. The monitored container, so it has the data from which the Changefeed is generated. Any inserts and updates on the monitored container, they are reflected in the Changefeed of this container. Then the Liz container is like a state storage to coordinate the processing the Changefeed across multiple workers. So the Liz container can be stored in the same account as the monitored container or in separate accounts, doesn't matter. Then there is a compute instance which hosts the Changefeed processor to listen for changes. Depending on the platform you're using, it can be a VM, it can be a Kubernetes pod, it can be an Azure App Service instance, or an actual physical machine, that doesn't matter. It has a unique identifier referenced as the instance name. Yeah. So, and then you have the delegate. The delegate is the code that defines what you, as a developer, want to do with each batch of changes that the Changefeed processor reads. That's very short about the Changefeed. The life cycle of the Changefeed is quite simple. You read the Changefeed. If there are no changes, then you wait a predefined amount of time, and then you read the Changefeed again. If there are changes, then you send them to the delegate. And when the delegate finishes processing the changes successfully, the list store is updated with the latest point in time, and then you start again reading the change feed. Quite simple. A quick recap of Changefeed. It's enabled by default in every Cosmos DB collection. You don't need to do anything to enable it. It uses your provision throughput, so it costs RUs. It captures inserts and updates by default, but you will only get the most recent item. It will not keep history. It is sorted within a logical partition, but not across partitions. It has a dedicated collection to keep track of the progress. It can be restarted, although it's a bit clumsy. I will come back to that. The batch size that you want to read, it can be configured in a number of items or size. And it is resilient to errors. So if your delegate fails, the thread of your delegate fails, the processing will start on another thread. Only time where it's not resilient, it's when it's on the first thread when it starts. So for this solution where we need to get Cosmos DB data into, let me find my pointer here. Laser pointer. Yeah, so the first solution that was presented by us, by cloud solution architects at Microsoft, was to, of course, read from the Changefeed collection, use Azure function as a trigger, then push the data into Event Hub, and then use stream analytics to deserialize the documents, which are quite complex, by the way, and insert them into SQL database tables. With Event Hub, if you're aware, there is a capture functionality, so we could also push a copy of the document into the data lake. So this first solution was not the best one. It showed that not to be the best one. We have quite large collections of documents. I think the largest collection has 26 million documents. And when we started to read from the beginning of all the documents in that collection using the Changefeed trigger, we had some issues. Also, Event Hub could not follow the amount of documents coming through. You know that also a funny thing, Event Hub can scale up, but automatically, but it does not scale down automatically. But anyhow, we had to drop this solution because it was not performing as we wished. So we thought a bit and ended with another solution where we removed the Event Hub part. We still have the Changefeed trigger, but the only output of the Changefeed trigger was the data lake. And then Stream Analytics was listening to the data lake, so new files in the data lake based on the it's called the last modified timestamp of the files, and then it could deserialize the data and put it into SQL Server. So that should prove to be working. So the Azure function is quite lightweight. We have input binding from Changefeed. We have output binding to the storage account, and then the Stream Analytics reads from there. It's a bit tedious to work with the 80 plus collection, which means that we have 80 plus Stream Analytics jobs, and when you try to deploy Stream Analytics job using CI/CD, that's quite an adventure. So, but we succeeded, and also one of the purpose of this setup was to move the deserialization away from SQL Server. We could also have used a JSON feature available in SQL Server to perform the work, but SQL Server managed instance was not so performant, so we would have a lot of logs and timeouts. So everything is in Stream Analytics coming from the Changefeed. Yep. Let's move to the next one. So as I said, we used a very lightweight Azure function. So with an input binding of the change feed and an output binding of the storage account. The configuration is quite simple. If you look at the configuration of the change feed trigger, so it's called Cosmos DB trigger in Azure function. Then you indicate what is the name of your database. Then you can specify the name of your collection, or you must specify a connection string to your Cosmos DB. You must give a read-write key to your Cosmos DB account, since you need to write back to the Liz collection. Then you can specify what is the name of the list collection, and I will recommend that you prefix your list collection with the name of your collection, so you will be able to retrieve the right collection items based on this prefix if you have many collections. This start from beginning equal true means that when you start the first time your Changefeed function, it will pick all existing documents from your Cosmos DB collection. If you restart your function and the start from beginning is equal true, it will not pick all the documents. What you need to do if you want to reprocess everything is you need to physically delete your Liz documents in the list collection and restart your Azure function. And then you will start again picking everything from start. Then here you have the delay in milliseconds for the feed poll. So how long should I wait before asking for changes again? How many items you want to have in every invocation. So here we choose 2,000 items, which was a appropriate size compared to the size of the documents that we have. And then for the output binding, we have the blob output. It goes into the capture. It goes capture the container that we're using, and we have just a connection string with the access key to this container. That's very simple. And you can see from the Changefeed. Sorry, I have to obfuscate some of the names, but these are all the Changefeed documents. You can see that for large collection of large Cosmos DB collections with many documents, it will create a lot of Changefeed analytic leases documents, and for small collection, it will only manage. It will only have a few documents. Sorry, I was reading the comments also. Why it says that live stream is not working on Learn TV. Is there anything I should do, or is it out of my hands? So after experimenting with Changefeed a bit, we found quite some issues or pain points. One of them is for each collection you want to use with Changefeed, you need one function. So here in this setup, we have 80 plus collection. That means that we have an app service with 80 plus function. We could also have spread it around across more than one app service. But yeah, in this case, we have 80 functions in this app service. It's also quite hard to control with the analytics list collection. I mean, when you want to restart from scratch, it's quite a hard reset where you delete Cosmos DB documents and restart your function. And if you have more than one function in your app service, then everything gets restarted. And this is also why you want a prefix to your analytics list collection. Otherwise, you will not be able to control at the collection level if you want to restart from scratch. It requires a read-write key to your Cosmos DB account, and this is also not always welcome by the infrastructure team that you should be able to write in the Cosmos DB collection, although you only want to read documents. once in a while, we have also seen that documents were delivered twice, but it's hard to reproduce. The way data is loaded in this setup is that they do a lot of batch changes during the night, so from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m., where 98% of the activity is. Then we receive millions of documents through Changefeed, and during the day there is no much activity. So this not evenly spread during the day load is also an issue sometimes. So far we are still working with Changefeed, but now we are waiting impatiently on the new solution that is coming, where we have the Azure Synapse link that we will be able to use at one point. So where we can connect directly on the Azure Cosmos DB container on the analytical store and pull data out into Synapse instead of into a SQL managed instance. Here, the idea is that data is pushed in this analytical store, so we don't touch the transactional store. Issue here is that it's not streaming just like Changefeed is. So we will need to keep track of where we arrive in the document reading. But once this is solved, we should be able to read data in a nice way using serverless pool, Spark, or SQL as the first stop before we reach the dedicated pools of Synapse. So looking forward to this in the coming months. A few words about scaling up and scaling out. So when you have 90 plus collections or 80 plus collections, we decide to scale up to P2 V2 in the app service. So that's 7 gigs of memory, 420 ACUs. And then we put up a schedule to scale out. So we added up to 8 instances in the Azure function, and this is based on the CPU percentage. So if the first during 10 minutes, the average CPU percentage is over 70%, or the memory percentage also is over 70%, we increase the count by 1 until we reach a maximum of 8. In the same way, we decrease when CPU decreases under 70% for a continuous period of, I don't remember, 3 or 5 minutes. Then we decrease the count by 1 until we reach 1. So we can see that works really, really smoothly. And during evening, where there are peak load, we see that it increases nicely up to 8. And then after that, it decreases again to 1. So that's really, really nice. And this doesn't need to be done for each function. It's at the app service level, so you can have one for the all functions. And here we can see the pattern you see at during the night, then it goes up to 7 or 8, and the same it goes down during the day to 1, and then up again every day. It's a really nice pattern. A few words about Deserializing, although it's not CosmosDB or Changefeed specific. We have to create stream analytics jobs, time 90, and time several environments where we read from the data lake where Changefeed pushes the change document. From time to time, we see also out of order events. In our use case, it doesn't matter because it's just for building a data warehouse and BI on top of that. So we don't have an issue with that. SQL Server managed instance also likes to time out once in a while when there is too much load. And we sometimes get warning from Stream Analytics saying that there is a very small difference in timestamps between the events or between the documents that landed on the data lake. So it's just warning us that it could result in out of order processing. A few words about the governance. What we found is that it was hard to govern when you had so many collections. When you look at examples around, then you see that with one collection, it's easy to manage. But in our case, where we had 90 or 80 plus collection, that's a lot of work, and it's also a lot of work to make a CI/CD deployment. I don't know if you have ever tried to deploy Stream Analytics using CI/CD, but that's not funny. That's a lot of work on the DevOps part to make that happen. Also, the process when we try to load from or start from beginning, I find it's always a bit what's called challenging to start deleting documents into a production system, which is managed by a third-party company. So do I dare or do I not dare to delete production documents, even if it's in the analytics list? And worst part is that I have this read-write key. It confers me too much power. I fear that I will do something wrong. So yeah, not a good process. And of course, in large companies, you will have several teams involved in the whole process from end to end. So some infrastructure team making available the different elements that you need, and probably giving you the permission on, for example, for the Azure function to write to the data lake, or for the Stream Analytics job to read from the data lake. And when you have many Stream Analytics jobs, then it's also something that needs to be coordinated. CosmosDB keys also are rotated once in a while, so you need to make sure that you rotate them and you inform the developers or the team that needs to use this Changefeed that key has been rotated. Otherwise, you will have some surprises. Yeah, so that's about governance. In conclusion, what I found out, what I took out of this project working with Changefeed, is that Changefeed is really good when you work with small bugs, when you don't have data that changes too often, when it's spread out during the day, so you have continuous updates or inserts. So new documents or updates in existing documents. And of course, when you don't need to get the whole history, because you don't get that with Changefeed. Changefeed is not that good, or even bad, I think, when you have many collections, because that's a lot of tedious plumbing that you need to do. And when you have huge bulks not equally distributed, then you get into some of the issues that I mentioned. Yeah, so that was my real life experience of using Changefeed in a large setup. I hope it has been some kind of interesting information, and I will be available for any questions throughout the day. And I see that I have less than 1 minute left, so that was perfect timed. Thank you for your time and for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Hey, Regis, thank you. This was a great session, very educative. And Changefeed, as you rightly said, is definitely a hidden gem. I had a question on when you mentioned that you were able to handle this with 80 collections, right? So did you have to do something above and beyond what is the regular setup, or did you have to do some extra configurations or some additional plumbing for that?
No, so the The tedious part is that you need to have 80 function and 80 stream analytic jobs, and what saved us was that you can specify a prefix to your analytics list collection, so you're always able to see which collection your document in the analytics list belong to, because it will be called the name of your collection and then suffixed with the name of the analytics list document. That was the helping thing. Also, if you want to restart from scratch, you just need to delete those 2 or those 10 documents of these particular collections.
Got it. Yeah, I think it is really awesome to see that you have used it for a fintech solution on the insurance side. You very nicely described the life cycle of a change feed and how it is automatically resilient, right? In case if one thread goes down, except for the first one, automatically it is handled and you get the level that you typically need. I think you are handling the out of order in the application in some way, or it doesn't really matter. So that's a good thing. And it's awesome that you are already using the Synapse integration for analytics, which is very popular these days. And you typically don't touch Cosmos DB. You do all the analytics on a separate destination, right? Without affecting the regular reads and writes.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Then it's CosmosDB's responsibility to push the data to the analytical store, and that I like.
Yeah,
it's not my problem.
Yeah, so it's great that you're already using that. And also, I was really impressed with the way you were able to scale up and scale out depending on the load and the time of the load and all that. So I think it was very educative. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Regis.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.